Before you can effectively manage your first feature development cycle as a PM, you need to understand all the work that needs to be done and who will be doing it. However, a big reason why effectively managing feature development is so challenging is because your feature development counterparts will differ depending on the size and maturity of your organization. Different organizations assign feature development responsibilities to different people. For example, if you're a new PM at a large tech company like Airbnb or Salesforce, you might have an engineering manager and a technical lead, each leading different components of the engineering work. But if you're a new PM at an earlier stage company, like a Series A startup, then one person might be handling all of the people management and technical work typically done by the EM and TL. Or you might find that some of the feature development work that needs to get done doesn't have a clear owner in your org. For example, if you're an early PM hire at an early stage startup, your team might not have a dedicated product marketer, but that doesn't mean that this work shouldn't get done at all. This is why the first component of our feature development playbook is mapping your team. This is a one-time setup activity you need to do before running your first feature development process at any company. The goal of this component is to define the what and who of feature development. In other words, what key activities need to get done throughout the feature development process and who will be doing them. In this lesson, we'll focus on the what by walking through all of the key activities that make up the feature development process. It's important that you understand each activity so you know who on your team is best placed to own it and to ensure that no work slips through the cracks. Once you have a clear understanding of the what, you'll define the who by mapping a directly responsible individual, or DRI, to each key activity in the next lesson. You'll start by defining a hypothesis of who owns what. You can use the Reforge feature development stakeholder map to document your hypothesis. To assist you, we'll share a benchmark of where ownership tends to lie based on the experience of Reforge experts across a wide variety of businesses. You can use this as a starting point or reference point as you determine who owns the activity in your org. We'll also explain what you can do if you realize there's no clear owner for an activity in your org. At the end, you'll be ready to validate this map with your manager and any individuals you identified as owning key development activities. Once you've understood the what and the who and ensured that no work will slip through the cracks, you'll be ready to proceed with the actual development work. This is how we'll spend the remaining sections, discussing how PMs can effectively drive and support each key development activity. For now, let's dive in by defining the key activities in the 3 development work streams: preparation, execution, and risk management. Preparation and execution happen sequentially, while risk management happens in parallel to both. In addition to these 3 bodies of work, launch planning, or the pre-work needed to enable a successful feature launch, may kick off during this time as well. We'll go into more detail on this work in the feature launch and iteration module, but for now, just be aware it may occur in parallel to this feature development process. As a PM, you should not do all of this work yourself. The role that a PM plays in each activity will vary from owning to providing input to monitoring progress. But as the manager of the feature development process, PMs need to be aware of all of the work that needs to be done, along with who is responsible for doing it. Let's walk through each body of work, starting with preparation. Preparation encompasses all of the work that takes place once your PRD is updated during feature design, but before any actual development work occurs. This includes 5 activities that typically happen in a specific order: defining milestones, writing technical specifications, estimating resources and time required, staffing engineers, and running the project kickoff. Milestones are project stepping stones from design to launch. Milestones should aim to accomplish 2 goals: ensuring your feature delivers value to users and the business, and sequencing the work appropriately. In their simplest form, milestones should identify what needs to be done and when. For example, complete survey modal by March 21. But milestones shouldn't just be a product of you breaking down the feature into different components. Defining the best milestones requires you to be strategic about how you can start gathering data to pressure test your feature's value early and start delivering value to users sooner, as opposed to waiting until the feature is fully functional and ready for release to all users. Technical specifications, or tech specs for short, detail how your feature will be built. They're a document that takes your PRD and milestones one step further by describing the approach engineers will take to implement the product requirements in code. Tech specs are typically valuable to write when there's an underlying complexity in how the feature needs to be built, but you don't always need them if the approach to building the feature is relatively straightforward. Once the PRD, milestones, and tech specs are written, the next step is estimating the engineering resources and time required to actually develop the feature. This activity factors in the desired output and the technical approach to development to define how long it will take to build the feature. Next is staffing. The core work in feature development can't officially start until you have an engineer assigned to it. For a small engineering team, this may be a relatively straightforward decision, while for a larger team with multiple engineers available, it may take more time. In either case, staffing is a balancing act that needs to consider the project timeline as well as the capacity and capabilities of individual engineers. Finally, once the team is staffed, they need to get up to speed on the project context, what they're building, and why. This context is typically best shared during a live project kickoff with the full team. The next body of work is execution. Execution refers to the development of your feature's design and functionality that brings it to life in your product. At the core of the execution phase is the writing and editing of code, or the building of physical products or hardware. We refer to this work, along with the day-to-day technical support needed to push it forward, as building the feature. While this work is best done by engineers, there are activities apart from actual development that enable this work to progress effectively. There's managing stakeholder communication, unblocking engineers by resolving bottlenecks, and running sprint retrospectives to identify and incorporate process learnings as you go. Managing stakeholder communication means setting up the right internal communication cadence to stay up to date on engineering progress, and also filtering information between engineers and other key stakeholders throughout development. The second activity is unblocking engineers by resolving bottlenecks. As development progresses, bottlenecks can arise in one of three forms. The work is harder than expected, some work needs to be completed before other work can begin, or new edge cases or questions arise that haven't yet been answered by the team. If these bottlenecks remain unresolved, the work can grind to a halt, leading to project delays. Enabling progress here requires the team to come up with a plan to resolve the bottleneck. Next is running the sprint retrospective to identify and incorporate process learnings. At their best, retrospectives enable you to rapidly improve your ways of working as you develop the feature. They also enable you to address operational issues before they grow into massive challenges that derail your project. The third body of work is risk management, which encompasses all of the activities to manage risk and keep projects on track. It's an ongoing body of work that requires attention throughout the development cycle. Risk management can feel like a game of whack-a-mole, where complications to a project seem to pop up randomly and need to be resolved quickly. These complications can come in the form of timeline delays, scope changes, or stakeholder misalignment. During preparation, risk management involves proactively preventing common problems before they even arise. This can look like checking in with key stakeholders on a regular basis to track progress, creating space to discuss challenges, or building alignment. We call these proactive approaches to risk management your offense. However, even with great offensive strategies, risks can arise during execution. Great risk management during this phase is all about swiftly responding to complications as they arise and making scope and timeline decisions as needed to address them. We call this your risk management defense. Effectively managing risks requires you to both have a strong offense and a strong defense. Without a great offense, you're setting yourself up to have to deal with more complications on the fly, which risks overwhelming yourself and your team. And without a great defense, the complications that do arise during execution are more likely to get in the way of your team's progress. The focus of this module is on the work that needs to happen to develop a launch-ready feature. However, there's more that a PM needs to start thinking about during this stage beyond just the feature. This includes how the feature will be rolled out to users, how the feature should be positioned, packaged, and priced, and how customer support should respond to any questions or issues related to the feature. This is where you'll likely need to loop in counterparts from functions outside of engineering, design, or product. Common counterparts include analytics, marketing, sales, and customer service, but could also include teams like HR or legal. We call this body of work launch planning. We'll talk about how to effectively plan for launch using the launch readiness checklist in the next module. For now, identify your points of contact in each of these key functions and share your feature and intended launch date with them so they can start to identify what work is needed on their end to plan for launch. We've now identified all the work that needs to get done during feature development. In the next lesson, we'll share guidance that will help you map your team to these activities.